The grand lecture hall of the Galactic University shimmered with holographic projections as Professor Xandor Quills adjusted his four eyes to scan the audience of 300 graduate students from 17 different civilizations. The space had been meticulously designed to accommodate diverse life forms: floating suspension tanks for aquatic beings, crystalline structures for lithoid students, and specialized atmosphere chambers for gaseous entities. Professor Quills activated his secondary vocal organ, a sign of academic formality, as he continued his lecture on human mythology, a cross-galactic folklore analysis. His tone carried a hint of scholarly mockery as he gestured toward the three-dimensional hologram depicting a supposed human with its bizarre upright posture. "And so, esteemed colleagues," Quills pronounced with academic pomposity, "we continue our examination of the human mythology that has, rather inexplicably, permeated 17 distinct civilizations, despite no credible evidence of their actual existence." The hologram rotated, showcasing the purported human's peculiar features. "Observe the preposterous anatomy that defies evolutionary logic," Quills continued, his secondary voice adding a resonant bass to emphasize his point. "Two legs for locomotion, inefficient and unstable. Two arms with primitive manipulative digits, clearly inferior to our standard six-limbed evolutionary pattern. And most absurdly, a single centralized brain encased in a vulnerable shell atop the body, rather than the distributed neural networks that sensible evolution produces." A ripple of amusement passed through the audience. A gelatinous student named Global quivered with laughter, temporarily losing cohesion. A crystalline being named Talvi clinked appreciatively. The persistence of human mythology across galactic cultures presents us with what I term the convergent mythology paradox, Quills stated, bringing up a star chart showing the inexplicable spread of human legends. How could 17 distinct civilizations, separated by both space and time, develop nearly identical mythological constructs about these implausible bipedal beings? Quills advanced to his next holographic slide, which displayed various cultural artifacts allegedly depicting humans. "The psychological inconsistency is perhaps the most telling evidence of fictional construction," he continued. "These mythological humans are simultaneously portrayed as fragile, short-lived creatures, yet are credited with astonishing resilience and adaptability. They are described as both highly cooperative and inexplicably warlike. They allegedly create art with no survival value, yet supposedly conquered spatial travel. The contradictions are endless and—" A piercing alarm cut through the lecture hall. Red warning lights pulsed along the ceiling as an automated security voice announced, "Unknown spacecraft breached orbital security parameters. Unidentified vessel landed in North Campus Quadrant. Security protocols activated." Professor Quills blinked his four eyes in rapid succession, an indication of surprise. "There is no cause for alarm," he announced, though his secondary vocal organ had involuntarily deactivated from shock. "This is surely a scheduled drill, or perhaps an unregistered diplomatic arrival." The students exchanged nervous glances. Nexol, a hovering insectoid being, buzzed with anxiety. "Professor, the North Campus is adjacent to this building." Before Quills could respond, a thunderous banging echoed through the lecture hall's entrance. The massive doors, designed to accommodate beings of all sizes, shuddered with each impact. "Security will handle this matter," Quills assured, his four eyes darting nervously to his teaching assistant. "Perhaps someone could contact the administrative—" The doors burst open. Standing in the doorway was a creature that caused instant silence to fall across the lecture hall. It stood upright on two legs. It had two arms with five-fingered hands. Its single head contained forward-facing eyes, a protruding nasal structure, and a mouth that was currently curved upward at the corners. It was, unmistakably, a human. "Hope we're not interrupting anything important," the creature said in perfect galactic standard, though with an unusual accent. "Captain Jake Parker, representing Terra. We heard there was a class about us and thought we'd audit. The lecture hall erupted into chaos. Several gaseous students dissipated in panic. Crystalline beings vibrated to shattering frequencies. Global melted entirely into a puddle. Professor Quills stood frozen. All four eyes widened to their maximum aperture. "This is impossible," he finally managed. "You cannot exist." Captain Parker stepped further into the room, followed by three more humans of varying sizes and pigmentation. "Yeah, we get that a lot," he replied with a casual gesture. "But here we are anyway." One of the humans, a female with darker skin and tightly coiled hair, approached the holographic display that still showed Quills's anatomical critique of humans. "Not a bad representation, though our neural structure is actually more complex than you've indicated here." She tapped her head. "It's quality over quantity." "Professor." "I am Professor Xandor Quills," he said stiffly, struggling to maintain composure. "And you are interrupting my lecture on human mythological constructs across—" "Mythological?" interrupted another human, this one with pale skin and facial hair. "That's a bit offensive, don't you think? We're standing right here." The first human, Parker, stepped onto the central platform where Quills stood. "Let me introduce the crew of the Terran ship Curiosity. I'm Captain Jake Parker. This is Lieutenant Maya Torres, our science officer." He indicated the female who had commented on the neural structure. "Commander Alexei Vulov, first officer." He pointed to the pale, bearded human. "And Dr. Omar Jackson, our xenoanthropologist," he concluded, gesturing to the fourth human, who was already examining the audience with evident fascination. Dr. Jackson approached, a trembling Nexal. "Fascinating adaptations for low-gravity environments," he murmured, making notes on a small device. "May I ask which planetary system you evolved in?" Quills finally recovered enough composure to assert control. "This is clearly an elaborate hoax. Humans cannot possibly exist. The evolutionary improbability alone—" "Oh, I've heard of this," Torres interrupted, examining the lecture notes displayed on Quills's console. "The humans are myths theory. It's been a source of amusement back home since we first intercepted your transmissions." "Your transmissions?" Quills echoed weakly. "We've been monitoring Galactic University broadcasts for some time," Commander Vulov explained. "Imagine our surprise when we discovered entire academic departments dedicated to proving we don't exist." From the back of the lecture hall, another voice called out, "I knew it! My theories were correct all along!" All eyes turned to see Professor Melvadoon, Quills's academic rival, pushing through the crowd of stunned students. Melvadoon, a six-limbed academic with luminescent skin patterns, indicating extreme excitement, approached the humans with undisguised glee. "My paper on human convergence possibility has been rejected 7 times by the Xenomythological Society," Melvadoon declared, circling the humans with academic hunger. "Quills here has personally blocked my research funding 3 years running." Parker glanced between the two professors. "Scholarly disagreement?" "Melvadoon promotes fringe theories without evidence," Quills snapped, regaining some of his academic haughtiness despite the circumstances. "Though I suppose in this particular instance—" He trailed off, unwilling to concede. "If I may," Dr. Jackson stepped forward. "Perhaps we could address some of your evolutionary concerns. Professor Quills, you seem particularly troubled by our bipedal locomotion and centralized neural structure." Quills stiffened. "Indeed. The energy inefficiency alone makes your existence evolutionary nonsensical, not to mention the vulnerability of housing cognitive functions in a single, exposed structure. Any rational evolutionary path would favor distributed neural networks and multiple redundant limbs. That assumes all evolutionary pressures are identical across planets," Torres countered. "Earth's specific gravity, atmosphere, and predator-prey dynamics favored our development. Our bipedal stance freed our hands for tool use, while our centralized brain allowed for complex abstract thought processes that compensated for our physical limitations. Impossible, Quills insisted, though with less conviction. And what of your alleged artistic behaviors? No species would evolve to dedicate resources to non-survival activities. At this, a fourth human who had been quietly observing stepped forward. She carried a small device which she activated, filling the lecture hall with harmonious sounds, what the humans called music. I'm Fiona Murray, cultural attaché. She introduced herself as the melody continued. This is Bach's Cello Suite, No. 1. We've been creating art, music, and literature for thousands of years. It's not evolutionarily superfluous. It strengthens social bonds, preserves cultural memory, and enhances neural plasticity. The students, recovering from their initial shock, were now listening with fascination. Several recording devices had appeared and were capturing every moment of this unprecedented encounter. This still doesn't explain the convergent mythology phenomenon, Quills protested, gesturing to his star charts. How could stories of humans appear in 17 distinct civilizations if you've only just made contact now? Parker exchanged glances with Torres, who nodded. That's actually why we're here, Parker said. We believe we've identified the source of what you call the convergent mythology paradox. Lieutenant Torres, would you share our findings? Torres activated her own device, which projected a series of complex temporal readings. We've detected unusual temporal radiation signatures originating from Proxima b. Our analysis suggests that sometime in the past, or possibly the future, a massive temporal displacement event scattered human populations across both space and time. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the lecture hall. Temporal physics was theoretical at best, considered impossible by most mainstream scientists. You're suggesting time travel? Professor Melvadoon asked, eyes gleaming with academic excitement. We believe a civilization with highly advanced technology deliberately displaced human populations throughout the galaxy's history. Torres continued. The legends you've studied aren't myths. They're cultural memories of actual contact with temporally displaced humans. This is preposterous, Quills sputtered. Time travel violates fundamental physical laws. So does faster-than-light travel, according to some theories. Commander Vulov pointed out dryly. Yet here we all are, in this galactic civilization. Dr. Jackson stepped forward, activating his own holographic display. We've analyzed the so-called human myths from your database. The temporal dispersal theory explains why these stories contain consistent elements, despite emerging in civilizations that had no contact with each other. The holographic display showed fragments of artifacts from various civilizations, all depicting similar humanoid figures. These aren't parallel mythological constructs, Jackson explained. They're scattered historical records of actual human presence throughout galactic history, preserved as legends after the humans themselves moved on or died out in those regions. The lecture hall had fallen completely silent. Even Professor Quills seemed at a loss for words as his career's work unraveled before him. But why? Asked Nexal, the insectoid student who had recovered enough courage to speak. Why would anyone scatter humans across time and space? Parker's expression grew serious. That's the billion-credit question. Our working theory involves a temporal war, a conflict so devastating that someone decided to intervene by separating human populations to prevent us from developing certain technologies in a unified manner. We believe they were trying to prevent a catastrophic event, Torres added. Possibly a war between humans and another advanced species. Professor Melvadoon was practically vibrating with excitement. This would explain the temporal anomaly readings my department detected last stellar cycle. The Academic Council dismissed them as equipment malfunction. This is absurd, Quills protested, though his voice lacked conviction. Even if we accept your existence, which I am not yet prepared to do, the implications for established xenomythological theory are revolutionary, Parker suggested with a slight smile. Devastating, Quills corrected glumly. Dr. Jackson approached Quills with professional sympathy. Scientific paradigms shift. Professor, it doesn't invalidate your work. It transforms it. You're not studying myths. You're studying scattered historical evidence of a temporal diaspora. That's arguably more fascinating. The students were recording everything, many already sending messages across the Galactic Information Network. Quills could see his academic reputation crumbling in real time. If your theory is correct, Quills said slowly, then where are the rest of these temporally displaced humans? And who was responsible for this dispersion? That's why we're here, Parker explained. We've been tracing temporal radiation signatures across the galaxy, looking for other human populations. Your university's database of human myths is the most comprehensive collection of potential evidence we've found. At that moment, the lecture hall doors opened again, and a delegation of university officials hurried in, led by the chancellor himself, a towering, multi-limbed being with ceremonial phosphorescent patterns glowing across his exoskeleton. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" the chancellor demanded, before stopping abruptly at the sight of the humans. His phosphorescence flickered in shock. "Chancellor Zrylak," Quills began weakly, "may I present Captain Parker and his crew from Earth?" "Terra," Parker corrected gently. "Though Earth is our planet's name." The chancellor's outer membranes pulsated, the equivalent of a stunned blink. "The mythological beings from Professor Quills's research program?" "Not so mythological, it seems," Melvadoon interjected with poorly concealed satisfaction. "Chancellor," Parker stepped forward with diplomatic poise, "we apologize for the dramatic entrance, but we've made a discovery that affects both our peoples. We believe someone, or something, has been manipulating the timeline, scattering human populations throughout history to prevent a future conflict." The chancellor's color shifted to a deep purple, a sign of intense concentration. "These are extraordinary claims that will require extraordinary evidence, which we are prepared to provide," Torres assured him, "including full genetic, historical, and temporal data." The chancellor turned to Quills. "Professor, as our foremost expert on human studies, what is your assessment of these claims?" All eyes in the lecture hall turned to Quills. His academic reputation, his theoretical framework, his entire career stood at a crossroads. He looked at the humans, living, breathing entities that completely contradicted his life's work, and made a decision. "Chancellor," Quills said slowly, "while I maintain reservations about some of their more extraordinary claims regarding temporal displacement, I cannot deny the evidence before me. These are, indeed, representatives of the species we have heretofore classified as mythological constructs." A collective gasp went through the lecture hall. For Quills to admit this was unprecedented. Furthermore, Quills continued, straightening to his full height, "I propose an immediate restructuring of the Xenomythology department to accommodate this paradigm shift. If the humans are willing, I suggest establishing a formal human studies program, with their representatives as consulting faculty." Parker nodded appreciatively. "We'd be honored, Professor." The chancellor's phosphorescence stabilized into a formal pattern. "Captain Parker, on behalf of the Galactic University, and, informally, the Galactic Alliance, I welcome you and your species to official first contact status. This is, without question, one of the most significant moments in our collective academic history." Dr. Jackson stepped forward. "Chancellor, if I may suggest, we have in our possession what we believe to be a temporal displacement device recovered from Proxima b. We would welcome your best scientists to examine it with us." The chancellor's outer membrane rippled with interest. "I shall convene an emergency session of the Science Council immediately. Professor Quills, Professor Melvadoon, you will both attend, along with our temporal physics faculty. And there's one more thing," Parker added. "Our ship received a transmission just before we landed. Ambassador Diana Reeves has arrived in system with the diplomatic vessel Harmony. She requests formal reception protocols be initiated. Ambassador, the Chancellor echoed. Earth has been preparing for galactic contact for some time, Parker explained. When we discovered your academic broadcasts about human mythology, we accelerated our plans. Ambassador Reeves is authorized to establish formal diplomatic relations between Terra and the Galactic Alliance. The lecture hall erupted into excited conversation. The Chancellor raised several limbs for silence. This situation requires immediate attention at the highest levels. Captain Parker, please extend my personal welcome to Ambassador Reeves. I will arrange appropriate diplomatic reception. Professors Quills and Melvadun, prepare your research for presentation to the Science Council. Students, he surveyed the excited crowd. Class is dismissed, but I remind you that preliminary contact protocols require discretion. The warning came too late. Hundreds of messages had already spread across the Galactic Information Network. The revelation that humans were real and present on campus would reach every corner of the Alliance within hours. As the Chancellor departed with his officials to prepare for the diplomatic reception, the students swarmed around the humans, questions erupting from various translation devices. Is it true you only have one heart? Asked a multi-cardiac Jovian student. How do you maintain balance on just two appendages? Inquired a centipedal being. Is music important in your culture? Questioned a sonic-sensitive harmonite. Parker and his crew answered as best they could, while Professor Quills stood to the side, watching his lecture hall transform into what felt like a historical nexus point. Professor Melvadun approached him with surprising sympathy. Your academic legacy is secure, Quills, Melvadun said quietly. Being the professor whose class was crashed by the first human delegation, that's one for the historical archives. My entire theoretical framework has collapsed, Quills replied bitterly. No, it's evolved, Melvadun corrected. Your meticulous documentation of what we thought were myths will now serve as the foundation for understanding the temporal diaspora of an entire species. That's a far more significant contribution than either of us could have imagined. Quills considered this, his four eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of processing new information. I suppose there is a certain poetic symmetry to it, though I maintain their bipedal structure is absurdly inefficient. Melvadun made a sound approximating laughter. That, at least, we can agree on. Across the room, Lieutenant Torres had set up her equipment to demonstrate the temporal radiation readings to a cluster of fascinated physics students. Dr. Jackson was engaged in rapid cultural exchange with anthropology students. Commander Vulov was explaining human spacecraft design to engineering majors, and Captain Parker was making his way back to Quills. Professor, Parker said, extending a hand in what Quills recognized from his research as a human greeting gesture. Despite the awkward introduction, I hope we can collaborate. Your knowledge of how stories about us have spread might be crucial to finding other displaced human populations. After a moment's hesitation, Quills extended one of his upper limbs. Captain Parker, I have spent 27 years proving you don't exist. I suppose I can dedicate the next 27 to understanding why you do. Parker smiled, that curious human expression that Quills had previously described in lectures as a threatening display of dental structures, but now recognized as something more complex. That's all we can ask for. Professor, the universe just got a lot more interesting for all of us. As the impromptu cultural exchange continued in the lecture hall, a sleek diplomatic vessel entered orbit around the university world. Ambassador Diana Reeves reviewed her notes one final time, preparing for humanity's official introduction to the galactic community. On her screen was a report about temporal radiation, scattered human populations, and the mysterious technology that might have displaced them across time and space. It begins, she murmured to herself, as the ship's systems announced preparation for descent. In the lecture hall, Professor Xandor Quills watched as his holographic display, once showing his careful deconstruction of human myths, now displayed a real-time map of potential temporal radiation hotspots throughout the galaxy. Each point represented a place where humans might have been scattered, where legends might be living history. "I'm officially converting this course," Quills announced to the remaining students. "Beginning next session, welcome to Human Studies 101, an empirical approach." The class erupted in cheers, a different sound from each species, but unified in excitement. As Captain Parker joined him at the holographic display, Quills couldn't help but think that perhaps the most interesting chapter of his academic career wasn't ending after all. It was just beginning. The following days at Galactic University saw unprecedented activity. The North Campus, where the Terran ship Curiosity had landed, became the center of a whirlwind of diplomatic, scientific, and cultural exchange. Ambassador Diana Reeves established formal relations with the Galactic Alliance in a ceremony broadcast across 17,000 worlds. Scientists from a dozen disciplines converged to study the temporal displacement technology recovered from Proxima b. Professor Quills found himself in the unexpected position of academic celebrity. His course on human studies became the most requested in university history, with remote attendance requests from scholars across the galaxy. Though still struggling to reconcile his previous theories with the new reality, he approached the task with scientific rigor. "The question is no longer whether humans exist," he explained to a packed lecture hall during his first revised session, "but why someone went to extraordinary lengths to scatter them across time and space, and what that means for our collective future." Captain Parker and his crew had become temporary faculty consultants, with Lieutenant Torres teaching a special seminar on temporal physics, Dr. Jackson co-leading xenoanthropology courses, and Commander Vulov consulting with the engineering department. Fiona Murray established a human cultural center that attracted thousands of curious visitors daily. In the Chancellor's private chambers, a more serious discussion was underway. Ambassador Reeves, flanked by her security team, presented evidence of other temporal anomalies detected throughout the galaxy. "We believe there are at least 73 potential human settlement sites scattered across both space and time," she explained to the assembled Galactic Council representatives. "Some may be ancient history now. Others might exist in what you would consider your future." "This temporal displacement technology," the Chancellor said gravely, "represents both opportunity and threat. If misused, it could destabilize the very fabric of space-time." Professor Melvadoon, now heading the newly formed Temporal Studies Department, displayed a complex holographic model. "Our analysis suggests the displacement was methodical, not random. Whoever did this had a specific outcome in mind." "But who would possess such technology?" asked a counselor from the Rigelian Collective. "And what future were they attempting to prevent?" Captain Parker, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "Our working theory involves a conflict between humanity and another advanced civilization, possibly one represented in this very room. Someone with knowledge of that future took drastic action to prevent it." An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. "You suggest one of our peoples might be responsible?" the Rigelian counselor asked coldly. "Or perhaps one of our peoples was trying to prevent a catastrophe initiated by humans," countered a representative from the Arcturian Synod. Ambassador Reeves raised a hand for calm. "We're not here to assign blame for events that haven't occurred, and hopefully never will. We're here to understand what happened and ensure peace for all our civilizations." Professor Quills, who had been analyzing patterns in the temporal radiation data, spoke up. "The dispersion pattern is consistent with a deliberate attempt to slow technological development while preserving the species. It suggests whoever did this wanted to prevent humans from developing specific technologies too quickly, without eliminating them entirely. A surprisingly compassionate approach to temporal intervention," noted Professor Melvadoon. "Or a pragmatic one," Commander Vulov suggested. "Complete elimination of a species from the timeline could create unpredictable paradoxes." The Chancellor's phosphorescence pulsed with decision. "We shall establish a joint temporal investigation commission with representatives from both human and Alliance scientists. Professor Quills, Professor Melvadun, you will co-chair the academic division. Captain Parker, Lieutenant Torres, you will lead the exploratory efforts to locate other human settlements. Ambassador Reeves nodded in agreement. Earth will provide full cooperation and resources. We must proceed with caution, the Chancellor warned. If we are indeed dealing with deliberate temporal manipulation, our actions could have far-reaching consequences beyond our current understanding. As the meeting concluded and the various officials dispersed, Professor Quills found himself walking alongside Captain Parker through the university's arboretum, a massive biodome containing plant species from thousands of worlds. "How does it feel?" Parker asked. "Having your life's work completely upended?" Quill's four eyes blinked in sequence. What Parker had learned was a sign of thoughtful consideration. Academically humbling, personally invigorating. True science requires constant willingness to revise one's theories in the face of new evidence. "Even when that evidence walks into your lecture hall unannounced?" Parker smiled. "Especially then," Quills admitted. "Though I maintain my critique of your bipedal inefficiency." Parker laughed. "Fair enough. We've wondered the same things ourselves sometimes, but we make it work." They stopped at a viewing platform overlooking a particularly stunning collection of bioluminescent flora from the Cassiopeian Nebula. "What troubles me most," Quills said, after a moment of silence, "is not the revelation that humans exist, but the implications of deliberate temporal interference. If someone possesses the technology to scatter an entire species across time and space, then what else might they have changed?" Parker finished the thought. "And are they still out there, watching to see if their plan worked?" "Precisely." Quills gestured with his upper limbs at the vast gardens below. "The universe we know may be the result of countless temporal adjustments, each designed to prevent some catastrophe we can no longer foresee because the timeline was altered." "A sobering thought," Parker agreed, "but also a hopeful one. In a way, it suggests that even in the face of potential disaster, someone chose preservation over destruction." Quills considered this. "An optimistic interpretation, Captain, though it assumes benevolent intent. Call it a human characteristic," Parker smiled. "Stubborn optimism in the face of uncertainty." "Indeed. One of those psychological contradictions I lectured about," Quills noted with academic amusement. "Perhaps not as illogical as I once thought." They continued their walk, discussing plans for the upcoming expedition to investigate other potential human settlements. Throughout the university, similar conversations were taking place as humans and Alliance species began the complex process of integration and mutual understanding. In her diplomatic quarters, Ambassador Reeves received a secured transmission from Earth's Unified Council. The message was brief, but significant. More temporal anomalies had been detected, not just related to human dispersal, but affecting other species as well. The temporal displacement wasn't isolated to humanity. It was part of a larger pattern suggesting far more extensive manipulation of galactic history than initially believed. "The rabbit hole gets deeper," she murmured to herself, authorizing an immediate classified briefing for Captain Parker and key Alliance officials. Meanwhile, in Professor Quills's new laboratory, Lieutenant Torres worked alongside Alliance temporal physicists to analyze the device recovered from Proxima b. Its technology was unlike anything either humans or the Alliance had encountered, suggesting an origin from a civilization far more advanced than any known to exist. "It's not just a temporal displacement engine," Torres explained as Quills observed. "It's also a monitoring system. Whoever built this wasn't just sending humans through time, they were tracking the results." "A temporal experiment," Quills suggested, his academic curiosity overriding his lingering skepticism. "Or a temporal safeguard," Torres countered. "Look at these settings. They're calibrated to activate only under specific conditions, as though it was designed as a failsafe, not a primary intervention method. Across campus, Dr. Jackson had assembled a comprehensive database of all known human myths from Alliance records, correlating them with Earth's historical timeline. The patterns were startling. Human appearances throughout galactic history corresponded with critical technological developments or potential conflict points. It's like someone was placing human observers at pivotal moments, he explained to a fascinated group of xenoanthropology students. Or perhaps removing them from situations where their presence would have changed history for the worse. In the engineering department, Commander Vulov worked with Alliance technicians to compare human and Alliance propulsion systems. The differences were instructive. Human technology had developed along entirely different principles, suggesting parallel evolution without cross-pollination of ideas. If our peoples had developed in contact with each other, Vulov noted, we would see convergent technological approaches. The fact that we don't supports the temporal isolation theory. As the first week of human alliance integration drew to a close, Professor Quills found himself revising the curriculum for his next lecture. The holographic display in his office showed not the debunking of human myths, but a comprehensive analysis of temporal displacement evidence. His academic papers, once focused on disproving human existence, were now being rewritten to explore the implications of deliberate temporal intervention. A notification chimed, informing him that Captain Parker's expedition team had completed preparations. They would depart the following day to investigate the nearest suspected human settlement site, a planet in the Tau Ceti system where legends of sky people had persisted for 12,000 years. Quills saved his work and gazed out at the university grounds, where humans and Alliance species now mingled freely. In just 1 week, the impossible had become routine. Myths had become empirical reality. Academic certainty had given way to fascinating questions. Perhaps most surprisingly to Quills, he found himself experiencing an emotion he had not anticipated: excitement. After decades of academic certainty, he had been thrust into a universe of questions. And, for a true scientist, questions were infinitely more valuable than answers. He activated his communication device and contacted Parker. Captain, I would like to request permission to join your expedition to Tau Ceti. Parker's response came with a hint of surprise. You want to leave the university, Professor? I thought your place was in the lecture hall. I have spent my career studying myths from the safety of academic abstraction, Quills replied. I believe it's time I studied reality through direct observation. There was a moment of silence before Parker responded. Request approved, Professor. We depart at first light. Pack for a long journey. The truth about your myths might take us farther than any of us expect. Quills deactivated his holographic display and began preparing for the expedition. Outside his window, the twin moons of the university world rose above the horizon, illuminating a campus transformed by the arrival of a species that, just days ago, he had insisted could not possibly exist. The universe, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of irony. And perhaps, Quills reflected, a far more complex and interesting history than anyone, human or Alliance, had ever imagined. As night fell across the galactic university, the stars overhead seemed to shine with new significance. Somewhere among them, scattered across both space and time, were the answers to questions no one had thought to ask until now. Tomorrow, the search for those answers would begin in earnest. Professor Xandor Quills, former expert on human mythology, now pioneer in human temporal studies, was ready for the journey. The Curiosity slipped into hyperspace with a subtle distortion of starlight, carrying its mixed crew of humans and Alliance scientists toward the Tau Ceti system. On the observation deck, Professor Quills experienced his first faster-than-light journey, with a combination of scientific fascination and mild physiological discomfort. The sensation passes quickly, Captain Parker assured him, noting the professor's discoloration. Your species adapts well to hyperspace travel. Fortunate, considering the academic opportunities, Quills replied. His four eyes, fixed on the hyperspatial distortion, visible through the reinforced viewport. I'm particularly interested in how the temporal displacement technology interfaces with conventional space travel. Lieutenant Torres' analysis suggests the displaced humans were sent not just through time, but through space simultaneously. Which explains why we found settlements so far from Earth, Parker nodded. The question remains, random dispersion or deliberate placement? Given the correlation with pivotal historical moments, I suspect the latter, Quills said. Though proving intent after potentially thousands of years presents significant challenges. The ship's communication system activated, and Commander Vulov's voice announced, Captain, we're receiving an encrypted transmission from Ambassador Reeves. Priority Alpha. Parker excused himself, leaving Quills to continue his observations. In the captain's private quarters, the holographic image of Ambassador Reeves appeared with an expression of controlled urgency. Captain, we've made a significant discovery, she began without preamble. The Arcturian Synod archives contained references to an ancient civilization called the Temporis. According to their records, the Temporis possessed technology that could manipulate space-time itself. Could they be responsible for the human dispersion? Parker asked. That's what's fascinating. The Arcturians believe the Temporis themselves were temporally displaced. Their entire civilization disappeared approximately 70,000 years ago, leaving only fragments of their technology scattered across the galaxy. Parker frowned. So we're looking at multiple displacement events? Not just humans? Exactly. And there's more. Some Arcturian scholars believe the Temporis weren't displaced. They evolved into a non-corporeal state and continue to monitor the timeline, intervening only to prevent catastrophic outcomes. Time-traveling guardians? Parker said skeptically. That sounds more like mythology than science. Perhaps. But consider this. What if the human dispersion wasn't punishment or experiment, but protection? What if the Temporis foresaw a catastrophe on Earth and acted to preserve human populations throughout space and time? Parker considered this possibility. That would explain the careful placement at historically significant moments. Not random at all, but deliberate preservation of human influence. Precisely. I've forwarded all available Arcturian records to Lieutenant Torres. This information might help contextualize what you find at Tau Ceti. After the transmission ended, Parker rejoined Quills on the observation deck, sharing the new information about the Temporis. The professor's color fluctuated with academic excitement. The Temporis. I've encountered references in obscure xenoarchaeological journals, but they were dismissed as pseudoscientific speculation, Quills exclaimed. If they truly possessed temporal technology, it would explain much about the inconsistencies in various species' evolutionary records. You think they manipulated more than just human history? Parker asked. Captain, I'm beginning to suspect that what we call history might be the result of countless temporal adjustments. A carefully curated timeline designed to prevent some catastrophic outcome we can no longer foresee, because it was successfully averted. Dr. Jackson joined them, carrying data tablets containing his analysis of Tau Ceti cultural records. If that's true, we might be searching for evidence of events that never happened, at least not in our current timeline. Temporal forensics, Torres added as she entered, having reviewed the Arcturian records. Looking for the shadows of erased events. The conversation continued as Curiosity traveled through hyperspace. Its human and Alliance crew members collaborating to untangle a mystery that spanned not just the galaxy, but potentially multiple timelines. Professor Quills found himself continuously revising his theoretical framework, each new piece of information challenging his previous understanding. 3 days later, Curiosity emerged from hyperspace in the Tau Ceti system. The fourth planet, called Kalis by its inhabitants, orbited in the habitable zone, its blue-green surface reminiscent of Earth, but with distinctive violet cloud patterns. Atmospheric scans show breathable conditions for both humans and most Alliance species. Torres reported from her station. Gravity at 1.2 Earth standard. Indigenous civilization at approximately early industrial development stage. Any response to our hails? Parker asked. None, Captain. Their technology wouldn't be capable of detecting or responding to our communications. Then we maintain orbital stealth protocols and send down a small research team. Parker decided. Minimal impact observation only. The landing party consisted of Parker, Torres, Jackson, Quills, and 2 Alliance scientists specialized in xenoanthropology. Using advanced cloaking technology, they descended to a forested area several kilometers from the nearest settlement, a sprawling town of stone and wooden structures situated along a winding river. Remarkable similarities to Earth's early 19th century development, Jackson noted, as they observed the settlement through high-powered optics. Though the architectural aesthetic is distinctly non-human in its organic curvilinearity, their religious temple is the central focus, Quills observed. Note the distinctive spire design. It bears striking resemblance to artifacts dated to the Second Centaurian dynasty, over 12,000 years ago. Torres conducted discrete atmospheric sampling, while the others continued observation. Captain, I'm detecting trace elements consistent with advanced technology, specifically temporal radiation, similar to what we found on Proxima b. Someone was here, Parker murmured. Recently, by temporal standards. Look, Jackson directed their attention to a procession emerging from the temple. Some kind of ceremonial event. Through their optics, they observed tall, elegant beings with iridescent skin processing from the temple. In their midst, carried on an ornate platform, was a relic that caused all members of the landing party to freeze in astonishment. It was unmistakably human in design, a weathered but recognizable navigation console from an Earth vessel, its metallic surface inscribed with faded English lettering. That's impossible, Torres whispered. That's a navigation system from an early 22nd century Earthship, but one that would have been built centuries after these people reached this level of development. Unless, Jackson suggested, this is exactly what we're looking for, evidence of temporal displacement. They continued observation as the procession moved through the settlement. The inhabitants treated the relic with reverent care, suggesting it held profound cultural or religious significance. I need to see their historical records, Jackson said. Their mythology might contain accounts of human contact. And I need detailed scans of that relic, Torres added. It might contain temporal signatures we can trace. Professor Quills, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. Captain, I believe I've identified something significant in their architectural symbolism. The repeating pattern on their buildings. It's reminiscent of the theoretical symbol system described in Professor Zanari's controversial paper on potential temporous communication methods. You think the temporists were here too? Parker asked. I think, Quills replied carefully, that we may be observing the results of not one, but multiple temporal interventions. The human technology, revered as a sacred relic, the temporous-like symbols integrated into their architecture. This civilization might have been influenced by both humans and temporists at different points in their development. As they continued their observation, a child from the settlement wandered into the forest near their position. Despite their cloaking technology, the child seemed to sense their presence, staring directly at their location with curious, multifaceted eyes. We should withdraw, Parker whispered. Minimal impact protocols. But before they could retreat, the child approached and spoke in a language none of them recognized, except Professor Quills, whose translator had been programmed with ancient linguistic patterns from across the galaxy. The child says, Quills translated with astonishment, the Sky People have returned, as the Guardians promised. Sky People? Parker echoed. A common designation for visitors from space in primitive cultures, Jackson explained. But the reference to guardians is intriguing. Through Quills's translation, they learned that the child's people, the Kalins, maintained an ancient tradition about visitors from the stars who had saved them from a great catastrophe. Some visitors looked like the Kalins but came from distant worlds. Others were different, walking on two legs with strange coverings over their bodies. Humans, Torres whispered. But most revered were the guardians, beings of light who moved through time itself, who had taught the Kalins to recognize patterns in the stars that would warn of future dangers. The child led them, despite Parker's reluctance, to a hidden chamber beneath the temple where ancient murals depicted three distinct types of visitors: the Kalins from other worlds, the two-legged humans, and luminous beings that seemed to exist partially outside physical reality, presumably the Temporis. Most significant was a detailed star map, showing not just the current positions of celestial bodies, but projections of their movements thousands of years into the future. Knowledge far beyond the Kalins' current technological capabilities. "This is extraordinary," Jackson breathed, carefully documenting everything. Multi-species intervention, collaborative rather than competitive. Torres scanned the murals with her equipment. "Captain, these images contain embedded information, quantum data stored in the pigments themselves. It's like they're leaving messages for anyone with technology advanced enough to read them." "Messages from whom?" Parker asked. "The humans who were here? Or the Temporis?" "Perhaps both," Quills suggested. "A collaborative effort across species and time." As Torres worked to decode the quantum information, the Kalin child watched with apparent understanding beyond their years. When Quills asked how they knew the landing party would come, the child's response was unsettlingly direct. "The Guardians exist in all times at once. They told our ancestors you would come today, just as they told them the Sky People would come before, and that others would come after. We are a nexus point, a place where many timelines touch." Before they could question this further, Torres announced a breakthrough. "Captain, I've decoded part of the quantum data. It's coordinates, temporal and spatial coordinates for other intervention sites." "Other human settlements?" Parker asked. "Not just human, multiple species, including several from the Alliance. According to this data, temporal displacement has been used dozens of times throughout galactic history, always in response to extinction-level threats." Professor Quills examined the data with growing excitement. This suggests a deliberate preservation strategy, identifying species with particular potential and ensuring their survival through controlled displacement when their original timeline faced catastrophe. "Are we talking about a galactic conservation project?" Jackson wondered. "Spanning not just space but time itself." As they debated the implications, the temple above them began to resonate with a low, harmonic tone. The child explained that it was the signal, a frequency they had maintained for thousands of years, directed toward a specific point in space. "It's a beacon," Torres realized after scanning the frequency, "designed to be detected by ships with specific technological configurations, like ours." "We were meant to find this place," Parker said slowly. "This isn't just a research expedition. It's a response to a call that's been transmitting for millennia." The implications were staggering. Their arrival wasn't random but anticipated, part of a plan set in motion thousands of years ago by beings who could perceive and manipulate the timeline itself. As they prepared to return to Curiosity with their discoveries, the Kalin child presented Professor Quills with a small, crystalline object, a data storage device of impossibly advanced design. "For the one who believed humans were myths," the child said in their language. "The Guardians said you would need this to find the truth about your own origins." Back aboard Curiosity, Torres and the Alliance scientists worked to access the crystalline device, while Parker reported their findings to Ambassador Reeves. Professor Quills found himself contemplating how completely his understanding of the universe had been transformed in just a few short days. "It appears," he said to Dr. Jackson as they reviewed the data from Kalis. That my academic specialty has shifted from debunking human existence to uncovering the truth about an ancient, temporal conservation program spanning multiple species and timelines. Jackson smiled. A far more interesting research focus, wouldn't you say? Indeed. Though I cannot help but wonder, if the Temporous intervened to save humans, Kalins, and perhaps dozens of other species from extinction events, what catastrophe were they themselves fleeing when they apparently transcended physical form? And are they still watching? Jackson added quietly. Still intervening when necessary? The question hung between them as curiosity prepared to depart for the next set of coordinates recovered from the quantum data. A planet, orbiting a distant star where, according to the information, another group of temporally displaced humans had established a colony 30,000 years ago. As the ship entered hyperspace, Professor Quills found himself drafting an entirely new lecture series in his mind. Temporal Anthropology, the conservation of sentient species across multiple timelines. His previous certainty about human non-existence seemed not just wrong, but almost laughably limited in perspective. The universe, it seemed, was far stranger, more complex, and ultimately more hopeful than he had ever imagined. Species thought lost to catastrophe had been preserved through temporal displacement. Beings of unimaginable advancement had chosen conservation over destruction. And throughout it all, the supposedly mythical humans had played a role significant enough to be scattered across time and space, their influence preserved, despite whatever calamity had threatened their original timeline. In his quarters, Quills began composing a message to his students back at Galactic University. In science, being proven wrong is often the first step toward a greater truth. I was wrong about humans. I may have been wrong about much more, and I have never been more excited to continue learning. As curiosity continued its journey to the next temporal nexus point, the combined human and Alliance crew worked together to unravel the greatest mystery in galactic history. A mystery that spanned not just the vastness of space, but the infinite complexities of time itself. The adventure that had begun with an interrupted lecture was evolving into something far greater. A collaborative quest to understand not just where various species had come from, but why they had been preserved, and what role they might yet play in the cosmic drama still unfolding across multiple timelines. For Professor Zandor Quills, former skeptic of human existence, it was the academic opportunity of a lifetime, or perhaps, more accurately, of multiple lifetimes across countless potential futures. The universe, it seemed, was far more interesting with humans in it, after all.